Hi, welcome to Hope in the Light of Suicide. I'm Tammy White, the founder of the Bobby White Foundation, and your host, along with my co-host.
Good morning, I'm Bonnie Snyder. Welcome.
And we're going to do things just a little bit differently today because we've had some technical difficulties and we have a really special guest joining us, and we've only got a few minutes, and hopefully we'll be able to get him back. We want to welcome Kevin Hines to our show. Hey, Kevin.
Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you.
Oh, nice to meet you too. I first found out about Kevin a couple of years ago, and our foundation purchased the licensing to his documentary, Suicide, the Ripple Effect. And Kevin, could you tell us a little bit about this and your story a little bit?
The film was made chronicling my story of triumph over adversity after my attempt of suicide off the Golden Gate Bridge that I survived. And the film really was a movie about finding hope and resilience in a great deal of pain, and how anyone who's going through pain of any kind can survive that pain to be here tomorrow and every day after that. And so we made this movie, myself and Greg DeCherry, and you know, we were two guys with bipolar disorder who wanted to make a film, and then we don't even call ourselves filmmakers. We're just guys who were trying to make something that could have an impact on people's lives. And now we know that the film has been seen by over 1 million people in over 20 countries around the world and counting. And it's something that has impacted a lot of lives. And we've had nearly 500 people say that the film saved their life.
That is just wonderful. Yeah, we got the documentary last year, and we were able to show it once before the pandemic hit. And we showed the film at a church down in South St. Pete, where it was a primarily black church, and within a 2-month period, they lost 3 young men between the ages of, say, 35 and 45 to suicide. And the church just really wanted to kind of grab the bull by the horns and really get to their congregation. And they contacted us, and we were able to present the documentary to the church. And we really wish we could have showed it a whole lot more last year, but the pandemic hit. But we're going to hopefully, maybe by summertime, maybe start doing some outside viewings and stuff. So I know you got another meeting to go to. Maybe we can get you back on again, and so that we have a little bit more time so that you can talk about your journey and the journey that your family had to take with you. It's quite amazing that you lived to jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. Very few people have survived that.
Yeah, less than 2% of people that have done that have survived. I'm very glad I got to live, and we'll find a time to get back on the show to talk more in depth. Okay,
we really appreciate it. We are going to show the trailer to the documentary, and we'll let you go so you can get on to your next meeting, and we'll talk soon. And again, we really appreciate it. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
No worries. You guys take care and be well. Talk to you soon.
You too, Kevin. Thanks.
Bye.
So at least we got him on.
I know, modern technology.
I know, it's just crazy. Yeah, he has an amazing story, and we really want to get this documentary out to the community. Just the pandemic, and especially now, it's going to be needed because of the pandemic. But let's go ahead and show the trailer to the film.
Maybe the reason that I got to live 15 years ago was the culmination of this moment right here. God, please save me. I don't want to die. I made a mistake.
You had a very significant spine injury, but you were completely intact neurologically.
Kevin Hines went to the bridge, jumped over the guardrail, plummeted 200 feet, but survived.
When we were in high school, he had that first major breakdown.
Junior year, and it was like a switch flipped. And then you started acting out publicly.
I didn't see hope. I didn't see a future.
We had this conversation in the hallway, and you said, "Hey, I found out what's wrong with me. I'm bipolar.
I really have been fighting for the last 18 years with this disease. Mania, depression, psychosis, hallucinations, all that's still there. I just know how to cope with it and I know how to beat it.
When you see a lot of mental illness, that's a clue that the culture is sick, and that's got to change.
So that hope is there. I know I have to keep going, to keep moving forward. You were the first person to ever say, you know, Kevin, you should talk about this, to make an impact on people's lives.
There is more that we all can give.
I've heard people say, well, hope is not an action plan. Well, it's a start. Talked to 10,000 Marines in 2 days. If you see someone in pain, please say something. It is about all of us coming together, utilizing the power of our voices.
You're going to get the help you need.
We've got a story to tell. Get the voices out there.
Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you very much. Thank you. We're all helping. We're all one part of a big team. We just need to realize it.
Yeah.
You know?
I want to say thank you. You saved my life.
He is 1 in a million.
You've been my inspiration.
Today there are days I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. I just know it's there.
You've done good with your second chance.
Whoa.
Yeah, his story is amazing, and thankfully he survived and is using his story to help other people. I mean, there is hope. That's what we're trying to instill in people. He in the documentary, you know, he said less than 2% of the people who jump from the Golden Gate Bridge survive. They have worked on putting up, you know, barriers, and even our own Skyway Bridge has been an issue. And they're, I think, just this year, getting ready to install barriers to help prevent the suicide deaths by jumping from these large bridges. In Kevin's story, he almost immediately after he jumped, he regretted it, and he. When he landed in the water, this really amazing thing happens, and we talk about almost like miracles, you know, just things that happen that normally wouldn't happen. I think it was a dolphin or something was right there and saw that he was in distress and swam around him to keep him up until the Coast Guard got there to pull him out of the water. Because he was hurt quite severely. But that was just one of those, you know, little miracles that it wasn't his time to go, even though he felt that it was at the time.
Yeah, and what I found from, you know, the trailer and I haven't, you know, unfortunately haven't seen the documentary yet, but, you know, just looking at the trailer, where one of the audiences that he has presented to is military.
Yes.
Which, you know, of course, you know, from my own, you know, being a veteran, and the rate of suicide amongst veterans. I don't think, you know, people realize, you know, it's like 1 every 22 minutes, you know, a veteran, you know, we lose
I say it's 22 veterans a day.
Yeah. And, you know, I remember doing a challenge where for 22 days do 22 push-ups.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try these push-ups. You know, it's fun. I've been out for, you know, I retired, you know, back in '97. You know, so push-ups is not my forte anymore. But, you know, the fact that, you know, so many, you know, this ripple effect is not just limited to, you know, one certain population.
No, it's not. Suicide does not discriminate.
No.
At all. I had mentioned that we had shown this documentary at a church down in South St. Pete, and they reached out to the foundation when they had these 3 young men take their lives in an extremely short period of time. And like I said, they really stepped into it to help the people within their congregation. We were beginning to do some more work with them, and like I said, the pandemic hit, and so it's it's just one of those other things that it's been hard to reach people, and when people really need it. And we're hoping that soon we'll be able to bring this to our community. We're hoping that there's many different types of venues that we can use. So if there's anybody out there in our area that is willing to help host one of these events, the idea is to have a discussion panel after the viewing of the documentary, lost survivors, maybe those who have attempted, but also have support. We're not going to just leave people just watch this documentary and then go off and try and figure it out. That's not the way we're going to do it. We really want to support the people that are going to be there and participate, because you're there for that reason too. So I'm biting at the bit. I just wish we could, get something going a little bit sooner. I have been in contact with a couple people. We may be able to do an outside venue at some point sooner rather than later. So that's one other thing that the foundation is working on, to try and get this out so we can help more people more directly.
As we've said, routinely, at least here, on this platform, that, whether it is suicide, mental health, substance use disorder, it's a difficult topic for some people. There's a lot of stigma that's attached to, these topics. Oftentimes it is viewed as that, and again, a repeat to, other conversations. It's that secret that we want to keep in the corner and not talk about. The hope being, if I don't talk about it, it'll go away. If, I don't speak about it, it doesn't exist. And I think it's important, to have stories, like Kevin's, like, yours, like mine, and, other people like us who, are either lost survivors, or, people who, fortunately, attempted but did not complete, to share their stories, to let people know that this is a real epidemic. It is something that really needs, a spotlight, placed on it, to also, let people know who are suffering from, mental illnesses, regardless to what it is, that you're not broken, that, we all go through adversities at one time or another. Some of us, the adversity is level 10, some of us it's level 5, some of it's like, okay, it's a little stubbed toe. But that being said, to allow people again to use their voices and, understand that there are people out here that understand what you're going through, and want to reach out, make things better, or attempt to make things better.
Right. Yeah, that's the important thing is, people don't realize that really they're not alone. There are people out there that want to help you. And you're right, there is still, the stigma with all of those. And with suicide, I find that there's still a really big stigma to suicide, even on the family's part, on the survivor's part. They don't want to acknowledge that their loved one died by suicide. They use some other excuse. And I've ran into this, unfortunately, a lot recently here in our own community, and primarily when it are the young teens that are the ones that complete. Not always. We have a great organization here in our community, a nonprofit called Ian's Way, and Jennifer lost her 16-year-old son almost 2 years ago to suicide, and their reach into the suicide community is to teens, and to get teens to talk, and to talk openly, and have a place that's safe for them to speak out, and it's really important. But there are an awful lot of loss survivors in within that age group that don't want to talk, don't want to acknowledge it. And it's so important, because that's what we're here to help stop more suicides.
And even in the acknowledgement, what I find is, a lot of the coulda, shoulda, woulda, survivor's guilt. Kind
yeah.
of thing, where, and I know, we've gone through it. What could I have done differently? How come I didn't see the signs? Did I do something wrong? In the case of it being, a teen, or one of our children, was their death the result of bad parenting?
Right. Well, yeah, and I think the thinking is, when it's a child, the parent, you automatically, your job is to protect that child, and you couldn't do it in this instance.
Well, I mean, and all the other things that go along with it too, along with, this is my child, I should have been able to protect them. And then, when you get into, philosophical or, spiritual beliefs, oh my goodness, my loved one died by suicide. Now they're, eternally damned. They're not, I'm not going to see them in heaven, if you believe in heaven, mind you. And, I've found, different groups that, I've been, group, discussions that I've been engaged in, that that mindset changes depending upon who you talk to and which group you're talking to. This group, would look at you and say, well, excuse me, no, God will forgive this, or that will be forgiven. But this group will be like, that's not going to be forgiven. And, we talked about, well, wait a minute now, let's, how do you reconcile that? And, so you throw that into the mix as well, along with, what is society, going to think about me as a person? To be, to acknowledge, oh, I lost someone. How? I still not cringe, but I find myself correcting people a lot when you say, well, what happened? Oh, they committed suicide.
Yeah.
And and as I'm talking to them, of course, you don't want to be rude, or my intention is not to be rude. It's like they committed suicide. No, I know sometimes it's like died by suicide.
I do that too.
They committed suicide, died by suicide. And finally I look at it and it's like, we're trying to change the language, guys. When you say committed, we typically think of somebody commits a crime, they did something wrong. Now some pushback that I get sometimes, but they did do something wrong. They took their own life. But was it, and then there's the discussion over, was it wrong? At that particular instance when the decision was, I'm ending my life. There is no other solution. There's nothing, there's nothing to save me from this pain. This is my only out because nothing else works. So is it a crime? So going back to the, how people approach this, I also see where a lot of anger towards the person who's not here anymore. How could you do this to me? How could you do this, to us? You know, you know, you were so stupid. Just all of the, and I listened to all the different.
Well, I think at first that it's that way for a lot of people. I was angry at Bobby. It's like, how could you do this to us? How could you do this to your family, your friends? I didn't dwell in that part of it for a long period of time because I did know that, he had MS for 25 years. It's a degenerative disease. And he wasn't going to get better from it. So that was kind of my rationing out of that. And I've thought about this, and I wanted to get your opinion on it because going into that when people have a chronic illness, and some states have it, and now it's popped out of my head, where assisted suicide. And primarily because as we age and the elderly population that do end up taking their lives, quite often it is because of some chronic illness. So would suicide be looked at differently if we were one of the states, and I think Oregon is one of the states that has that, if we had a law for assisted suicide in cases like that?
I am not a fan. I don't think that I will ever be a proponent for making assisted suicide okay, for a number of reasons. Now, one would think, like, well, wait a minute. If I am, suffering from, a chronic, illness, if I am in immense pain, and I don't want to live anymore, or I don't want to live like this, like my quality of life is sub-zero, why should I not be able to exercise the choice to end it? And for me, I'm all for, I'm a pro-choice kind of person. I mean, I don't mind putting that out there. I am pro-choice. What I believe and what I would do for myself, I don't believe in forcing my beliefs on another person. However, my issue with, someone who is suffering from a chronic illness, they're in a lot of pain, and they look to someone, to assist them in ending their life. Analytically, I think to myself, are they in their right mind to make that kind of decision? It's the same thing like, I know every time I go to the doctor, do you have a living will? Do you have an advance directive? And I don't. And, it's like, well, not that I'm throwing my daughter under the bus, but, my brain, processes. All right, so my daughter is the medical one in the family. And I say, you know what? If I am not in a position to make a decision about myself, I leave it to my daughter. I don't know, kind of like, oh, but will she make the right decision? But I trust, my children,
right,
both my children, however, I defer to my daughter a lot in medical stuff. That mental health side of me says, but, am I speaking through a sound, clear mind? And I want to be cautious when I say that. Or am I speaking through the mind of, I don't want to live like this? And I get it. People don't want to live like that. But what if, let's just say somebody allows them, themselves to complete a suicide, take part in an assisted suicide, and the family co-signs on it, and say within, a period of time after that, completion, a cure comes along or something that would have improved quality of life. then to me that adds another ripple onto that suicide. Again,
Well, in a way, that sort of happened with Bobby. 6 months after he took his life, the state of Florida had medical marijuana. And I always think if he could have waited 6 more months, would this have helped?
Yeah, we don't know.
You know?
We don't know. Because I'm a firm believer that every life is precious, and everyone deserves a high quality of life. And it becomes, all right, Bonnie, are you going to come out of both sides of your neck with this? Because it's like, wait a minute, didn't you just say this? Aren't you contradicting yourself when you say this? Someone, who is, suffering and, in obvious pain, what do you do about that? Like you mentioned medical marijuana, and I get asked when I'm with, the groups that I do, so what do you feel about medical marijuana? Or, as a matter of fact, I was with, this week, that's kind of been our topic. We're talking about marijuana. And, some of the youth were like, so what about medical marijuana? And I explained to them, guys, there's the difference between recreational marijuana and the medical stuff. And I was like, remind you, I can give you, the professional side of me that speaks, from this side. I can also give you my personal views. And sometimes they do line up with each other. But I say, okay, so marijuana is, or medical marijuana is, is legal. I mean, it's, something that we can use. Would that make a difference? Would that have made a difference? And if the answer is, is no, I'm not saying, well, then, why have the conversation? It's not what, mind you, it's not what I'm saying. I don't know. There are so many variables that go into not only a person's mindset when they're thinking about when they've reached that stage. This is, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I want out. And they decide to check out. And the other side of it is well, what ifs, or what about this? I know we always teach. Back when I was, before I came into Florida, when I was in Kansas, and I used to teach about, what am I saying? Abuse survivors, or people who have suffered, experienced abuse or have been subjected to abuse. That's how I want to say, subjected to abuse, and how sometimes that abuse leads them into, we're talking sexual abuse, mind you, has sometimes led to depression, which leads to these thoughts of suicide. And the one thing I was told, told in my people who are in class with me, never look at somebody and say, well, think about the people you're going to leave behind. Because for me, I find that's like one of the cruelest things that we can say. Because at the moment, it's like, yes, on one level, it is about, think about how, this is going to affect those that you left behind. But at the moment, that's not what is the priority right now.
That's not the mindset.
The priority is, let's talk about, where you are right now. What have you done to get yourself past this? Now, going back to, I've never had to deal with the pain of, if we use Bobby's case, the pain of my MS has progressed here. And what do I do about it? All right, I get that. Is this the first time you've been in pain? Maybe not this much pain, or maybe, not this particular disease, but how did you get over it before? How did you deal with it before? Or you've obviously dealt with it before and survived, because I'm talking to you right now. Rather than, I almost look at it as, guilting the person who's thinking about, suicide. Not only do I feel guilty, but now I feel equally guilty because I guilted the person who was,
Well, and it makes that person feel even worse than what they're already dealing with at the time. Yeah, I think that towards the end, probably like, I don't know, maybe particularly the last 6 months of Bobby's life, he was not talking about his MS and the pain that he was in. He did have a really, really bad exacerbation about 6 or 7 months prior to his death. And it was probably one of the worst. And I thought after time that we got him back to what was going to be his normal. It wasn't probably going to be as good as it was prior to that, but it wasn't the worst either, because he had worse periods. Of course, he was a lot younger when he had those bad spells, but I don't know if it is as he got older and it got worse, which, like I said, it is a progressive disease. It wasn't going to get any better. And he didn't want to be a burden, but the thing is, he didn't talk about it either. He didn't really let us know, per se, that he was feeling that bad. He did make a comment Easter Sunday, which was 2 weeks before he passed away, that he was feeling bad. He told his sisters that he was feeling bad, and made the comment, and this came from my brother-in-law, he made the comment that he wasn't feeling good and that maybe everybody would be better off without him. I found that out the night he died. I didn't even know about it until afterwards.
And that's, hearing that, that leads, a nice segue to what we say to people. If someone says something that, remotely sounds like, a cry for help or, the potential for a suicide, say something.
Right.
I think, we've talked about it, before on the show. Like, there's a difference between, I jokingly tell everybody, I'm a diehard Cowboys fan. The boys lost, the playoffs again. It's like, I could just die. The boys lost.
Right.
Now, where somebody would look at her, it's like, she's not really serious. She's upset because her team lost, because her friends are like, get used to it. But using something as simplistic as that, I could see, so it's like, she's not really serious. At the same time, it doesn't hurt to say you're joking, right?
Right.
But do we need to have a conversation about this? Because that might be the very one where I'm so tired of them losing. And again, not that I'm bagging on my team; they're always going to be my team. However, this just might be the time that it may have less to do with the fact that my boys are not in the playoffs again. And that is the, that thing where, I've got this going on, I've got this going on, I've got this going on, and on top of that, my favorite team is not in the playoffs again. And that could be that one little straw that breaks the camel's back. So yeah, always, always, reach out to a person, because you never know what's going on in that person's life, and that, one, we call them those random acts of kindness, might be the very thing, to pull them back from the brink, or pull them out of, that spiral that they're in.
It's really important. And I spoke with you and John about this last week. I was concerned about a friend of mine. And it's one of the signs kind of to look for that somebody might be suicidal. I have this old friend. He owed me money for 43 years. And he reached out to me and paid me back that money. And he, within the last couple of years, had lost his wife. They were married for like 30 years. And of course, dealing with, Bobby's death and learning what we've had to learn, in the last few years about suicide, taking care of old business and cleaning up things or giving things away are all signs that somebody might be suicidal.
Mm-hmm.
And I was concerned because I had reached out to him again, asking, what came over you to, I had forgotten about it and was never concerned about it, this was, 43 years ago. And he wasn't getting back with me, like, as soon as I felt that he should. He finally did reach back out to me, and I think everything is okay, but that's my first concern is, and I don't play games with it. It's, this is why I am asking you, what, I appreciate it, and the money came at a really great time, but I'm more concerned about you and if you are suicidal, because this is what some people do. And I think he's okay. He's been in contact a little bit, so for now. But you have to. You can't just ignore things like that.
Along with those other signs, when you look at, people who, one of the signs that I see is, you find somebody who is displaying sign of depression. They're sad. Then all of a sudden, at the end, say it's Monday, down in the dumps, blue, and then here it is Wednesday, and all of a sudden they're on top of the world. Everything's fine. And, how often people mistake that for,
they're going to be
gotten
better
over this rough patch, they're okay. When, the reality is, no, they're not okay. The euphoria that you see is they've told themselves, I'm going to be okay. All of this is going to go away. This pain that I've been feeling is not going to exist anymore. And it makes me think of, that phrase, that moment of euphoria before you die. And how, everybody talks about that moment of euphoria. When it comes to, someone who is, contemplating suicide, that moment of euphoria is, it's different, for somebody who's, ill, and it's like at an end of stage.
Right.
But, someone who is depressed, sad face, and all of a sudden, it's a happy-go-lucky, reach out.
Well, and that's probably one of the most misunderstood signs of that that somebody may be, contemplating taking their lives. I'm put together a PDF that we'll have available soon on the foundation website that people can download that are signs to look for, so that you out there, everybody can. You need to be familiar with this, because you just never know when that time is going to come, and some of the signs are giving things away. For a lot of times, for the younger demographic, say the 16 to 25, 30 years old, 30s, are doing dangerous things. They're all of a sudden, they're doing things that
Daredevils.
Yeah, daredevils, and excessive drinking, drugs. That they all could be signs, and there's many more, but we'll put together a PDF. And
Maybe that, along with that, those subtle differences in personality. Sometimes people drop those little subtle hints, and we don't pick up on them. As you know, I shared, in Patrick, I hope the drugs kill me. And I just remember, all right, let's talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
And excuse me, saying to him, that's difficult for me to hear. Let's talk about that. No, I don't mean it I don't mean it, seriously. I'm just tired of feeling like I feel. And I'm like, okay, and then, 2 days, a month and a half, 2 months later, he was gone. And, I played that conversation in my head over and over and over again. And my daughter and I, had this conversation, doing the coulda, shoulda, wouldas, like kicking myself on one hand, don't do that. It was not your fault. You did the best you can, to the, I should have been able to do more. We should have done more. But again, recognizing and picking up those subtle signs, but then also, at the same time, as it comes to suicide, it's loss survivors, the follow-up discussion that I have to, you see the signs, you talk to the person, you address it, understand that, and this was difficult, for a while for me to reconcile with, again, that tug and pull that I get in with sometimes that mommy side of me that says, you should have did this, you should have did this, and then that professional side of me that says, however, you did everything that you could have done. Just because someone completes, it's not your fault. You could do everything that you, put all the interventions in place that you possibly could. That person would still, if they got their minds made up, there's nothing you can do. It makes me think about what Carl said when he was on. Would we have delayed it for another day, another week, another year? I don't know. Speaking of Carl, when I spoke to him this morning, I want to, aside for a minute and do a shout out. It's his birthday today.
I saw that on Facebook. I did wish him a happy birthday on Facebook.
Yeah, I saw that. Thank you. So, wish Carl a happy birthday. It's just, I continue to be grateful for having this platform. And, having, people like us, out to, share our respective stories and, if not, what's the word I'm after? Giving people permission, quote unquote, to discuss this topic. Like, it's okay. Not that you need my permission to do so. How often do we see, people, well, yeah, God, I want to talk about this. I want to do something, but I'm afraid. And, I call it that bystander effect.
Mm-hmm.
Like all the everybody stands by. It's like, who's going to do it?
Who's going to do it first?
Who's going to do it first? And then, when somebody, says, something, and then everybody else follows. So, I'm, blessed to be one of those people who's not, decided I'm not going to be a bystander.
Well, no, I pretty much decided that early on, also, because there was just no way I was going to let my husband's death not it's probably not the right term, go unnoticed, but it's important that people understand.
We don't want our loved ones' deaths to be in vain.
No, and it's really important. Like I said, Bobby was always in the shadows. I'm the one who had the business in the community. I'm the one that everybody knew, and he was just happy as could be with that. Now it's kind of like the tables are turned, and I've got him pushed out into the front, but and for a very important reason. His death, as with with all suicides, affected so many people, and it wasn't just our immediate family. It has affected so many people, and next week is the anniversary of his death. And actually today, we moved up here from Fort Lauderdale 30 years ago, and moved into our house on this day.
I think I saw that. I remember seeing that.
We left Fort Lauderdale on March 31st, parked the U-Haul in front of our house, closed on April 1st, and was moved in by his family by 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I had thought about that yesterday morning, and then when I posted we had been here 25 years, 2 weeks later, he was gone. Just 2 weeks later after I posted, our 25th anniversary of moving here. And little did I know with that post how things were going to change in 2 weeks, or in a week, actually.
Oh no, I'm with you.
And then today also is the anniversary. I think it's the 11th anniversary of my mother-in-law going to heaven. And at first, to me, it was kind of funny. It might not be funny to family, but I was like, April 1st was always our anniversary of moving here. Mom, why did you have to die on that day? But I mean, she had a long life, and she was a wonderful mother-in-law.
Well, I mean, it's the symbolism of it. As I was, driving in, to the studio today, I was thinking to myself, it's April Fool's, and I'm like, is there an appropriate April Fool's joke? It's like, I'm like, we're taping on April Fool's Day. Like, how'd that happen? At the same time, I'm not a trickster, however, there's been a couple years at work where, I went all day, told people, I said, I'm submitting my resignation today. And they were like, what? And I was like, yeah, no, I'm submitting my resignation. And this went all day long, and I'm sitting at my desk and people are like, are you really quitting? And I'm just like, I've had enough. I've really had enough. I'm submitting I'm really going to retire. I'm done. And, it gets to the end of the day, and people are like, you're really quitting? And I was like, guys, April Fools. oh. And what's funny is as I'm thinking about, that story, I've had enough, April Fools. If only, whether Bobby, Aiden, Patrick, anybody else who was lost to this epidemic, that they, all would come into wherever we are and say, hey, by the way, April Fools, I'm still here.
Yeah, we can wish.
We can wish.
But, yeah, I don't know. Well, we didn't at the beginning of our show get to do our thank yous and everything else because we really had to jump into this.
We do. I was thinking the same thing. Like a little reversal here, guys.
Yeah, we're kind of doing things a little bit backwards today. But, as Bonnie said, I mean, we are so fortunate to have this platform and be able to bring this information to you, as hard as it may be. Next week is going to be really difficult for me for the show. I think I'm trying to work it out in my head, but my sister-in-law is going to be here. Bobby's youngest sister is going to be on with us in the studio. But John and Rob at WeBeam TV, we are just so grateful for them for all the work that they do for us for this show. And if it wasn't for John, we wouldn't probably be here.
That's true.
But they've just always have been so wonderful and gracious, and even working out the technical difficulties. So, we're forever grateful for them for giving us this platform. And the month of March, I don't have the totals yet, but Greg Schindler's State Farm office did a fundraiser for us, and so we're just kind of waiting to hear for that. And we do have some donations on our Kindest page, who we've partnered with to help support the show. There's many levels, so if you feel comfortable at any level donating to the foundation and the show, so that we can help continue to support, bring guests on like Kevin Hines, we'd be really grateful. I'm drawing a blank. Another, and I need to give a shout out to him. We're still working on our Hope T-shirts, but Gulfside Custom T-shirts is donating the first 24 shirts to the foundation. So all the proceeds for the sales of those shirts will go to the foundation. I'm just like, come on, I'm really waiting for these shirts. So, but we really appreciate Tim and everybody at Gulfside Custom T-shirts for what they're doing, and they're working on putting up a landing page where we have 4 T-shirt designs that we're going to be able to bring, and Gulfside Custom T-shirts is donating the work to put that page together for us. So hopefully that'll be coming soon also. And we've got our purple folders. We delivered some more to the Growth and Recovery Counseling Center this week, and Port Richey Police Department. And those are available. You can go to our website, and we have a list of all the community partners where the purple folders are available. Of course, you can either call or email me at the foundation, and we can get them out to you. We can mail them out if need be. So they've been extremely helpful. Hopefully sometime soon we're going to have a couple guests on who have received the purple folders. I've contacted a couple of them, and they've agreed to come on and share their story too.
Yeah, there's, so many ways that, you as the, viewing audience can, get involved and stay involved with this. We can give the, I think of the shout outs to people who connect to the show every week and then share it on their respective pages and get the word out. And as far as, again, going back to donations, whether it is, $1, or $5,000, depending on, every little bit, helps, because this is, a very important topic. This is an epidemic. An epidemic. Thank you. My tongue's twisted there. But this is an epidemic that affects so many people in so many different ways. From the person who has completed, to the friends and loved ones that are left behind, to those of us who are the resources for those that are left behind. To use the title of the documentary, that ripple effect.
It definitely
can be very,
is.
Wide. It's not, it's not narrow.
And something just popped into my head. I was on a call last week, and I got a very staggering number put in my head, that in 2019, we had 6,400 teen suicide deaths. Now, that shouldn't be. That just shouldn't be. I know that it's increased. It has probably increased during the epidemic. We're not going to have those numbers until probably the end of this year, for 2020. And I'm kind of afraid of what those numbers may look like.
But it is something that needs to be addressed.
But it has to be addressed. It needs to be talked about. And, that's why we're here. That's why we want to bring these people to you. Share their stories, share our stories. Another way you can donate, and I want to put a shout out to, he's kind of like an extended family member. Is my sister-in-law's side of the family, Keelan King, he's actually is doing like you did for his birthday, is raising money for the Bobby White Foundation through Facebook. And I want to thank him for doing that. That's another way you can support. And also remember, you could choose the Bobby White Foundation as your charity of choice for all your purchases on Amazon. And I've received a lot of packages this week.
Yes.
So like I said, there's several ways that you can help support us, and we genuinely appreciate it so much. Like Bonnie said, every little bit helps, whether it's $1, $5,000, $25,000.
And we thank you for always, tuning in.
Yes. Thanks. It's going to be difficult at times, but please remember, there's always hope. Thank you.